So Night Rain has been out for a while now, and to the surprise of quite a few people, it's actually pretty good. Turns out, a game focused around the base combat mechanics of Souls games is pretty engaging, even without all the lore, world building, and permanent character upgrades. The bosses are fun! No. Nuts. Okay, most of the time anyway. But this really should have come as no surprise. Since Demon Souls released in 2009, the combat of Souls games has largely been unchanged, with most big changes coming as the addition of new mechanics. Different games might have different weapons, different abilities, and different ways of parrying and countering, but stamina management is always the name of the game. In fact, ever since FromSoft released Kingsfield in the 90s, they've been using stamina management based combat systems in their games. And while this may have iconically become their style, they weren't the only pioneers in the early days. In 2001, a whole 8 years before Demon Souls, a completely unknown Spanish studio called Rebel Act made a game whose genre was what we now call a Soulslike. Severance, Blade of Darkness. And if you think that name's got a lot of edge, just check the back of the box. By steel will thy flesh divide. Oh hell yeah, dude. It's not wrong, this is what you're in for. It's a dark fantasy third-person action game with light RPG elements and a whole bunch of gore. While the game was critically well received, with many reviewers praising the real-time shadows, something that was pretty new in games at the time, it unfortunately didn't sell particularly well. 2001 was an excellent year for gaming, and it had some stiff competition. Max Payne, Halo, GTA 3, Metal Gear Solid 2, Silent Hill 2, and the much-loved Diablo 2 expansion pack, Lord of Destruction, are just some of the amazing games that came out that year. Severance was only on PC, and if any of you older viewers remember the 2000s, console successes at the time gave the general impression that PC gaming was dying. This wasn't entirely true, of course, but popular icons of PC gaming like Steam and World of Warcraft were still a few years away. It wasn't all doom and gloom, however, as the game got a remaster in 2021.
Looks like
Pre-Souls series Souls-likes.
back on the menu, boys!
The remaster maintained the core game, simply making it easier to run on modern machines, upscaling textures and allowing it to run at higher resolutions, as well as adding controller support and porting it to the various consoles. That's the version I've recorded as. While I do own the original disc, my GOG copy got automatically upgraded. For some reason they've dropped the Severance part of the title as well, simply going as Blade of Darkness now. I'm not sure why, but if I had to guess, I would say it has something to do with the show Severance on Apple TV, which released in early 2022. I could easily see there being some issue with trademarks.
The music dance experience is officially cancelled.
The game uses a stamina management based combat system, much like the Souls games. The levels, while ultimately linear, are quite sprawling and utilize a lot of shortcuts back to previous areas. Enemy encounters are usually pretty small scale, with 2 or 3 enemies usually being the limit what you can safely juggle. There are multiple melee weapon types, shields, and the ability to dodge, although it's more of a jump to the side, making it trickier to master than the Soulsian dodge roll. Well, unless you're the Amazon, that is. There's only one difficulty, and the game is hard. However, from here things start to differ. Weapons get more powerful as the game goes on, and as a result require more stamina to swing. The higher level a weapon, the more stamina it needs, which means you get locked out of using higher level weapons if you're too low a level yourself. If you press F1, a handy menu telling you your combos will appear. The combos are simple enough, usually the attack key and a couple of directional keys, but landing one can be tricky and dangerous. They can deal a lot of damage, and it's a very rewarding feeling when you've timed it correctly. When you level up, you get a fixed amount of additional health and stamina, depending on your character anyway, and you'll need that stamina to use higher level weapons, while the increased level might unlock a higher level weapons combo. Levels also unlock some combos intrinsic to the character, requiring a weapon type rather than a specific weapon. While you can sometimes find a higher level weapon earlier in the game, it's usually better to wait till your character is at the appropriate level, otherwise you'll just tire out all the time and open yourself up to attacks. Healing is limited too. Rather than the revolutionary Estus flask we've all come to know and love, instead the game used more traditional health potions. You can carry up to 4 500 point healing potions, 2 1000 point healing potions, and 1 full life potion. For the first few levels, this essentially makes everything a full life heal, but by the time you start hitting the mid-game, you'll have thousands of HP. There's at least 1 full life heal every level, and a number of other potions around, sometimes hidden and sometimes carried by enemies, who will use them mid-combat if you don't kill them quick enough. There's also lower level potions and food that you automatically use on pickup, but these are less effective as the game goes on. You also fully heal when your character levels up, making potion use more of a tactical choice when you have a high XP bar. The game does let you save anywhere and at any time though, so save scumming feels nearly intentional sometimes. There's also the power potion. This increases your attack and defenses for a short time, and there might be one on every level, but I rarely use these. I just never really found quite the right time, so when I found my first one, I just kind of kept it for the rest of the game. So when you start the game, you choose your character. There are 4 to choose from, and each has their own preferred weapon type and innate combos that they can pull off. While there are no attributes for you to edit, each character plays pretty differently, generally down to their weapon types, but there are some differences in their passive stats. The first character is Sargon the Knight, and he's the most well-rounded. He uses one-handed weapons and shields and has 3 armor upgrades. Armor in Severance is just a straight defensive buff, with a high enough armor value completely nullifying damage from weaker enemies. Each weapon you equip passively lowers defense by a certain amount, even allowing you to go into negatives, but Sargon completely mitigates this by having the best armor in the game, assuming you find it at least. He's essentially the main character, as most enemies in the game will carry weapons that Sargon can use, and his playstyle is pretty solid. He even has a boss unique to only his playthrough, another knight called Ragnar. If any character was to be John Severance, it's this guy. The next character is Naglfar the Dwarf. He's kinda like Sargon, but he has a weaker jump and dodge, and generally less range. He uses one-handed axes and hammers alongside shields, and has 2 armor upgrades. There's probably some dwarf fanciers out there salivating at the prospect of playing a proud dwarven warrior, but honestly, he's kind of the worst character. Next up is Zoe, the Amazon. Zoe has the lowest health pool, but she also has the best dodge, and she is by far the quickest character. Her signature weapons are spears. This gives her great range, and she has some excellent combos, and combined with her dodges makes her probably the best character. She only gets 1 armor upgrade, but it doesn't really matter. She can just speed around levels and outdodge nearly every enemy while cutting them up with her combos. The final character is the Barbarian, Tukaram. He's your typical great weapon user. He has 1 armor upgrade, a decent enough dodge, but his greatest strength is, well, strength. He deals a lot of damage with his combos, and while other characters deal with shield users via blunt weapons, Tukaram just shatters shields consistently. Even the endgame ones can't withstand his strongest combos. That said, as a great weapon user, his attacks are kinda slow, but he does have decent range. He's somewhere in the middle of all the other characters, with Sargon possibly being better due to his speed and armor, but Tukaram is great and is kind of the game's mascot. The story is pretty straightforward. It's your typical fantasy fare, somewhere between Conan the Barbarian and Lord of the Rings. Gods created the world, there was an evil one that was doing bad stuff, one of the good ones made a sword for mortals to kill the bad god, the titular Blade of Darkness. That was ancient history, but now the evil is stirring again and a new hero needs to find and take up the sword. Each character has a different first level, which kinda gives them a backstory as to why they're on this journey, but it really doesn't matter. There's also a pretty in-depth tutorial, which I do suggest to do if you're completely new to the game. It covers absolutely everything you'll need to know. It's a genuinely good tutorial. For my playthrough, I went with Berserk Conan, Lord of the Dark Soul himself, as he is truly based. Strength-based, that is. First level is Kashgar, an old ruined fortress leading into a tribal graveyard. Levels in Severance are fairly linear. There are secrets to be found for the inquisitive mind, and a few alternate paths, but generally there's only one way forward. There's no map or mini-map to be had, so having some focus in the level design is pretty welcome. Kashgar is a pretty good starting point for this too. Early on there's a diverging path, but both ways will bring you to the same place. You'll also get introduced to the basic enemies here. First up are the orcs. They come in 2 flavors, the easily dispatched minor orcs and the far tougher great orc. While these guys become standard enemies as the game goes on, they're pretty much mini-bosses at the moment, particularly as you don't have many combos. There are also zombies, skeletons, spiders, and these little guys called scavengers. Of the 4 of these, only the skeletons are actually a threat, and the sound they make when they do their 3-hit combo will be etched into your brain by the end of the game. Spiders and scavengers take 1 hit to kill, but require a specific attack to hit, while the zombies are basically just fodder for you to practice on. Tukaram starts with the Chaos Sword, but can find both his second weapon, the Axe Eclipse, and third weapon, the Death Sword, in this level. The combination of these weapons really sets him up for the first few levels. He won't have a lot of stamina yet to really utilize the Death Sword properly, and won't be able to use the specific weapon combos until levels 7 and 8, but the increase in power is welcome regardless. You'll also find a bow here, although you'll find bows constantly as you go throughout the game. The bow deals a tiny amount of damage and won't be able to kill any but the weakest of enemies. You're also limited to only 10 arrows, until you can get poison ones anyway. And aiming is terrible, but you'll still want one regardless. The arrows can activate switches. This isn't required just to get through most levels, but it is required for a number of secrets, so you definitely want one. Anyway, once you're through the level, you're introduced to the overworld map. At certain points you'll get a choice of which level to approach next, which is nice for replayability. But you do have to play every level, so no matter what order you approach them in, you'll play every one. The first choice is between the Fortress of Tel Halaf and the Mines of Kelbegen. I went for the Fortress first. When you arrive here, you start in the outer wall. The level is a big circle. As you progress through it, you work your way towards the inner wall, opening shortcuts back to the outer wall. As you approach the tower in the centre, there are a number of great orcs to fight, but eventually you reach the throne room and find this dying knight. He tells you that the orcs attacked and the duke's been captured and asks you to save him. He gives you the key to leave the level, but on the way out there's this strange block in the wall. If you follow the corridor along, you'll find your first proper secret, a rune. There are 6 runes in total to be found across a variety of levels, and while they don't do anything for you by themselves, you'll definitely want them by the end of the game, but more on that later. Once you've picked up the rune, all these traps would activate, so best of luck! Next up is the mines. The mines are nearly like the reverse of the fortress. Early on, you'll get to a central area, requiring multiple gemstones to advance. There are multiple directions to go with a number of orc fights, some of which only trigger once you've collected the required gemstones. The level has a lot of traps and jumps, so it can be a little tricky at times. There's also some spiders, and a scavenger eats the blue gem, forcing you to chase it down. Another rune can be found here also, requiring a timed jumping puzzle in order to acquire it. Once you have all the gems, you activate an elevator, which brings you to the hardest enemy you'll have fought yet, a troll. By now, you should have combos for your first and maybe second weapons, as well as a couple of intrinsic ones, but the area you fight the troll in is ample enough that you can spam attack and dodge. This won't be possible forever though, so don't get used to it. Once it's dead, you find out about a dwarven hero and the location of some powerful weapons. And then it's off to the tombs of Ephyra. The orcs have gotten here ahead of you, so the first few encounters are all orcs. They haven't made their way into the inner tomb yet though, so it's up to you to find the way in. There's a new weapon for the barbarian in this section, his 5th weapon, the longsword. Nice, skipping right past number 4. Once you've cut down a few orcs and found the way in yourself, the orcs get replaced with skeletons. And not just 1 or 2, you're given groups of 3 skeletons at a time to fight. While this initially might seem pretty hard, it's possible to get the skeletons to cut each other down. Just remember to get the last hit or you don't get any XP. Eventually you're introduced to a new enemy type, the flaming skeleton. It's a lot tougher than the normal skeletons, and it carries the king's shield, a shield even the barbarian has trouble smashing. However, as long as you're careful, it doesn't use any attacks you haven't seen before, so you can safely take it down slowly if need be. After the flaming skeleton is dead, there's a key item called a fetish to pick up, but there's another rune to be found as well. Once you've got it, you head to the central tomb, and after fighting a few more groups of skeletons, you're introduced to the next boss, the stone golem. It hits like a truck, but it's slow, and after fighting so many groups of the much quicker skeletons, probably have no problem with the golem. Once you beat it, you get the Queen's Sword, a useful lifesteal weapon for the one-handed characters, and combined with the King's Shield from the Flaming Skeleton, gives both Sargon and the Dwarf an excellent setup for the next few levels. Unfortunately, as the Barbarian, I didn't really care much and only took it because I had to finish the level. With the tombs complete, it's on to the island of Karum. This level is kind of like a cross between the tomb and the fortress of Tel Halaf. It's full of the undead. There are zombies, skeletons, zombie knights. However, as you make your way further in, you start encountering living knights. These guys have a lot more health and armor than the orcs, and their weapon's poison. Poison isn't that big a problem really, you can get rid of it by just using a healing potion, but coupled with their shields, increased defenses, and superior tactics to the orcs, these guys become more of a battle of attrition. As you make your way up the center of the fortress, you'll find a new weapon for the barbarian, the cutlass. Just in time too, because you're introduced to a new enemy type, the Minotaur. Minotaurs are big, quicker than the golem, and deal just as much damage. However, they're big fleshy targets, so if you've been keeping up with your combos, it won't last long. And as a reward, the barbarian gets his next weapon right after, the 2-bladed axe. It might seem weird to get 2 different weapons so close to each other, but the barbarian has different combos depending on whether he's using axes or swords. I personally prefer swords. The combos feel nicer and they have less defense penalties, but the axe combos generally hit like a truck. Anyway, no time for that now, we've got more mini-bosses to fight. This is a spawn. It's a kind of demon. They don't deal a lot of damage, but they are fast, teleporting around the place and spamming ranged attacks from a distance. This might seem pretty rough compared to what other enemies are like, but one well-placed combo and yeah, that's all you really need. With the spawn dead, you advance to a chamber where you learn that there's 4 keys out there somewhere that open the way to a legendary weapon to defeat the evil you've been encountering. Well, whatever, you don't care, because it's time for the next boss fight.
My, what a tasty morsel. Who are you? A hero, a visionary, or food for my worms, new courage for my slaves, a placing for my armies.
This Timu Cenobite is a vampire, and well, he's different to every enemy you've encountered so far. Both his weapon and blocking with his shield steal life from you, and if you get to range, he just teleports behind you. When you beat him, he summons a dragon and flies away while saying he knows a bigger boy who can beat you up. With the vampire gone, it's off to the next level. 4 keys means 4 different levels, but right now we have a choice between 2. The Shalatulwar Fortress or the Oasis of Nejeb. Each level is the gateway to 2 other levels, where 2 of the keys are. Depending on which direction you go here, you'll be locking yourself off from the other area for a while. The Fortress of Shalatulwar is your stereotypical orc fortification. As you can guess, there's a lot of orcs. If you look carefully, you can find the armor upgrade for the barbarian, as well as a new weapon. There's an arena near the top of the fort, overseen by a grey orc equipped with gear you haven't seen before. After a number of fights, including one against a minotaur and the great orc himself, you get a dungeon key. And after a quick shortcut back to an earlier part of the level, some more fights with great orcs and a troll, you'll find the kidnapped duke. He gives you some information, but
Come with me. Let us leave this dungeon, and while we walk, I shall explain to you how to recognize the signs.
No!
yeah, he didn't last long. So a couple more great orc fights and off you go to choose the next location. I went with the Fortress of Nemrut next. Nemrut is basically a big icebound cathedral. You'll find plenty of knights here. As you make your way through the level, you'll eventually get to a pair of recesses that need 2 amulets to proceed. You can't carry both at the same time for some reason, and both require you to descend into these areas with repeatedly spawning skeletons. One you can get out of pretty quickly, but the other one you'll have to kill a certain number of skeletons first. There's also a secret here with a power potion, but more importantly, the ice axe. It has really reduced power compared to normal weapons, but I use this axe well into the endgame. The combo from the axe is pretty decent, and the elemental damage it causes seems to scale way better than its power seems to suggest. Individual hits are a bit weak though, but the combo is so useful it doesn't matter. There's also a rune here, and in order to get it, you need to figure out this trap using the bow. With the rune and both amulets in hand, the way to the inner cathedral opens up. The boss here is another spawn, probably the most badass spawn you'll fight in the game. When it falls though, you have the first key you need, and then it's off to the Gorge of Orlok. The Gorge is another snow level. As the name might suggest, there's a lot of orcs here, but also a few trolls. There's even a secret here with a troll and a doom axe, the barbarian's second best weapon. Bit low level to use the combo right now, but hey, I'll take it. As you make your way through the winding cliff paths, you eventually come to a small castle guarded by knights. And eventually you come across the next key. Well, I think this is the key. The texture may have broken. Once you pick it up, you activate the next boss, the Ice Golem. You should have seen this one coming. It's not too hard, he's a bit tougher than the previous one, but it's fine. What's more surprising is the troll that attacks you as you're about to leave the level. However, by this point you can kind of deal with any single fight the game throws at you, except for fire. The Gorge of Orlok completed and 2 of the keys acquired, you can finally head back to the Oasis of Nejeb. This level is easy enough. There are a number of orcs to fight as well as some zombies. The main conceit in this level is that you need a number of keys to progress, and while you can find one of them fairly easily, another one of the characters is locked in the room and gets killed by gas. And you might think, oh, I'll just grab the key and get out quick, but yeah, there you go. So, you have to go and find the other key first, which involves fighting another golem. There's another sword here for the barbarian too, the greatsword. By this point, I'm actually a couple of levels ahead of where this weapon is at, so I can use this combo straight away. As you continue on, there's a gorge and a rune to descend into, and another rune to be found. This one also requires the bow and a good number of arrows to get. Eventually, the level brings you to a room with 4 skeletons and a grave. A vampire attacks you here, but it's no different than it was previously. You can deal a lot of damage to yourself if you hit its shield with one of your bigger combos. You better be careful. With the Oasis complete, it's time for another choice. I chose the Temple of Farum. This was probably my favourite level in the entire game. There's a castle here guarded by orcs and knights. First you need to get sacred water and fire to certain receptacles, and then you need to find a staff to open the way to a central building. The final rune is here too, hidden in a room with another golem. The puzzle to get this one looks like it's right out of Indiana Jones. Once you have the staff, you open the central area, and there's a simple puzzle here with some gems and some light. Is this another Indiana Jones reference? Well, anyway, you get the next key, but before you finish the level, it's time for the most ultimate boss fight ever. 2 golems. Shit, dude, it's really starting to become apparent that maybe they needed another enemy type or two. The fight isn't too bad, and once you win, it's off to the Forge of Xshathra. So the Forge is, as you might have guessed, a fire level. There's lava everywhere, a lot of narrow twisting paths, and a lot of jumps are required. There's orcs, skeletons, zombies, knights, and multiple minotaurs here. Which wouldn't be so bad, but... As you may have guessed, this is one of my least favourite levels. However, if you're playing the knight, his final armour upgrade can be found here. I'm sure there's more secrets to be found here too, but I got out of here as soon as I could. This level had far outstayed its welcome. When you get to the end, you fight 2 spawns? Okay, game. Wow, cool. Yeah, I did not expect that. I really thought you were going to throw a fire golem at me. Ah, fuck, I spoke too soon. Okay. Golem, meet Ice Axe. With all 4 keys in hand now, we can finally head to the Temple of Ianna. This level starts out pretty chill. There's no enemies, instead you have to find the locations to place each key. However, once you put the 3rd key in... Oh, god damn it. And not only that, there's a lot of unreachable archers here, and you won't have enough arrows to take them out. The minor orcs now carry scimitars, which deal a lot more damage than you would think. As you advance, they throw everything at you. Knights, skeletons, golems, minotaurs... Hell, just before the end, a Chaos Knight appears, and unless you're playing the Knight, you wouldn't have seen one of these guys before. They're slow and hit hard, and even have a ranged attack. It doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it interrupts anything that you're doing. They're a lot tankier than other enemies too, and they have this ridiculous shield. He doesn't even have the good grace to die when you beat him, he just teleports away. What a dick! Well, whatever. The Blade of Darkness is now yours. But that's not all, because all those runes we've been gathering... This is why. The runes purify the blade, turning it into the Sword of Ianna. Although, I think she just looks like Shodan if you ask me. Now, at this point of the game, if you didn't have the 6 runes, you could return to previous levels before attempting the Tower of Dal Gurak. You can attempt the tower without them, but that would get you the bad ending, and you wouldn't have access to the ranged combos the sword gives you. But that doesn't matter for me though, as I got them as I went, so Tower of Dal Gurak, here I come. For a penultimate level, the tower is actually fairly straightforward. They throw a bunch of high-level enemies at you, but there's nothing to really fear anymore, especially with the ranged attacks on the sword. Each level or 2 of the tower has something of a combat challenge, then prevents you from returning to previous areas. There is a secret on this level. Early on you can find a cave with a knight in it. He has a key that opens up this armory halfway up the tower. Each of the final weapons and armor for each character are in here, but honestly you don't need them at this point. They're just for style more than anything else. So you continue up the tower, fighting knights, flaming skeletons, 2 metal golems. After a few jumping puzzle bits, you eventually come to a boss. Not the boss, but a new one at least. Mescalam Dug, the massive demon, but yeah, sit down little boy. With that speed bump out of the way, there's an elevator to the top of the tower where you face... fucking skeletons. Again. And this time, they have the vampire shields, so you gotta be careful because you can just kill yourself on these. After you've downed a few, the necromancer Dal Gurak joins the fray, and while he has a couple of tricks, I finally downed my first power potion, and yeah, he doesn't really last. Now, if I didn't have the runes here, that would be it. But we do, so this giant door opens, leading the way to the final level, and... Wait a second, is that supposed to happen? I'm pretty sure he just dropped to his death. Oh, he's just alive again? Okay, whatever, I suppose. This is the final level, the Abyss. It's actually really straightforward. It's a fairly linear path with a few deviations. There's a fight here with 2 golems, but they're easy by this point. There's some minotaurs, but they give you plenty of room to fight. There's a fire golem, but you can kill him in seconds. Eventually you get to this confusing room that seems to double back on itself, but eventually you come across the vampire again and... Okay, yeah, you kill him for good this time, and you can even get his shield if you want. You keep descending further, killing spawns and chaos knights until eventually you get to the bottom of the abyss. Home of the ultimate evil, the Lord of Chaos. And look at this golem-looking motherfucker right here. Lucky for him, he's got a giant flesh mech, so this will be our finest battle. Except it won't, because even though he has a lot of health, the Lord of Chaos is pathetically easy. He teleports away and manages to get some damage in with some ranged attacks, but all I have to do is attack, dodge, and yeah, he goes down fairly quickly. Then there's a brief cutscene where he gets absorbed into the light or something, and our character returns the sword of Ianna to the temple, and that's it. A bit abrupt if you ask me. My playthrough took about 30 hours to complete. The controls took some getting used to. Any bit that required jumping was always a crapshoot. The enemy variety really started to drag towards the end, and the story was just kind of MacGuffin hunt after MacGuffin hunt. But overall, I think this game was really good. Especially for the time, nothing else was doing this kind of thing back then. The combo system was a little odd, but it became second nature after a while, and landing a big combo and instantly killing 1 or more enemies always felt excellent. The dismemberment made your attacks feel weighty, and the cathartic moment when you chopped the Minotaur's head off always felt great. Especially if you'd been struggling with one for a while. Finding new weapons always felt good, especially when you found one with a combo that really worked for you, and the runes and armor pieces were always a great find. So Severance, or, well, Blade of Darkness I guess. It's good. If you like Soulslikes and retro games, you should try it out. It's on GOG and Steam and every console now, so there's no excuses anymore. As always, if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. Please like the video if you liked the video, or don't if you didn't. Feel free to leave a comment, and if you aren't already subscribed, consider subscribing for more. What is it I do here? Reviews? Playthroughs? Playviews? Ooh, yeah, that one. Subscribe for more of those. And as for next time, I think next time I'm going to need something a little less dark. Something a little more stupid.